The heat in Chicago didn't break at night. It just turned slick and heavy, smelling of hot asphalt and old river water. Inside Smith's auto care, the air was thick with the scent of motor oil and cheap coffee. Sam Smith wiped a grease-stained forearm across his forehead, leaving a black streak near his receding hairline. At 45, Sam's body still carried the rigid, unbreakable posture of a Marine who had survived 2 tours in Fallujah. He liked the quiet of the night shift. Engines made sense. They had rules. You fix a broken piston, it stops knocking. If only the nightmares from his deployment were that simple. It was 1:15 a.m. when the shop bell chimed. Sam slid out from under an '08 Chevy Impala, his knuckles bruised, a heavy wrench ready in his right hand. A man was standing by the reception desk. He didn't look like the usual late-night breakdowns. He was tall, easily 6'4", wiry, and dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that looked entirely too warm for a Chicago summer. Yet, he wasn't sweating. "We close at midnight for walk-ins," Sam said, his voice a low, gravely baritone. "Emergency towing only." "It is an emergency of sorts," the man said. His voice had a strange, rhythmic cadence, like a foreign language poorly hidden beneath an American accent. "My transmission, it began slipping a few miles back." Sam stepped closer, his military instincts immediately putting him on high alert. Something about the man's posture was predatory. He stood too still, his shoulders pushed forward, hands tucked deep into his pockets. But it was his face that caught Sam off guard. The stranger had striking amber-colored eyes and a jawline covered in a thick, precisely trimmed beard that couldn't quite hide how abnormally long his canine teeth were when he spoke. Worse, though, was the smell. It cut right through the pungent fumes of gasoline and rubber in the garage. It was the copper tang of fresh blood mixed with the musky, wet dog stench of an apex predator. "What kind of car?" Sam asked, keeping a safe distance. "A black sedan. Left it just outside the gate," the man replied. He stepped into the light of the fluorescent bulb, and Sam noticed his fingernails, thick, yellowed, and filed down into dull points. "The name is Lawrence." "All right, Lawrence. Leave the keys on the counter. I'll look at it tomorrow morning." Lawrence smiled, exposing far too much teeth. "I would prefer if you looked at it tonight, Mr. Smith. I have a long journey ahead of me, and the full moon is only 2 nights away. Time is short." Sam looked past him toward the chain-link fence outside. The street was empty. No black sedan, just the flickering orange glow of a broken street lamp. When Sam turned back, Lawrence hadn't moved an inch, but his amber eyes seemed to catch the light, glowing with a faint, unnatural luminescence in the dim shop. "There's no car out there, pal," Sam said, his grip tightening on the wrench. Lawrence tilted his head, inhaling deeply through his nose, his chest expanding unnaturally. A low, vibrating rumble, a sound no human throat should be capable of producing, echoed in the back of his throat. "My mistake," Lawrence whispered, his eyes locking onto Sam's pulse point on his neck. "I must have parked a little further down the alley. I'll bring it closer." Without waiting for a reply, the man turned and glided out into the dark. He moved with a terrifying fluid grace that didn't match his massive frame. Sam walked to the door, locking it and flipping the sign to closed. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a familiar rush of adrenaline surging through his veins. This wasn't a customer. That was a soldier scouting a perimeter. Sam didn't sleep that night. He spent the remaining hours until dawn cleaning his tools with a meticulous, aggressive focus, but his eyes kept darting to the darkness outside the garage bay doors. The scent Lawrence had left behind, that heavy, copper and wet fur stench, hung stubbornly in the humid air, refusing to be masked by the fumes of the WD-40. By 8 a.m., the morning heat had arrived, turning the concrete floor into an oven. Sam walked the perimeter of his property, down the narrow garbage-strewn alleyway running behind the shop. He found what he was looking for. Deep, jagged gouges were torn into the asphalt, as if someone had driven heavy iron spikes into the road. Beside them, pressed into a patch of dried mud near a dumpster, was a single footprint. It was massive, shaped vaguely like a human foot, but the toes were elongated, ending in deep, punctured holes where massive claws had dug in for traction. Sam knelt, touching the edge of the print. It did not make sense, but his gut, the same survival instinct that had kept him alive through mortar fire and ambushes, told him exactly what his rational mind wanted to reject. He was being hunted. He closed shop early at 4 p.m., locking the heavy deadbolts and pulling down the steel security shutters. The drive to his small, brick bungalow in Bridgeport was agonizing. Every time Sam checked his rearview mirror, he expected to see a black sedan or, worse, Lawrence's towering silhouette. Instead, he just saw the aggressive bumper-to-bumper traffic of the Chicago rush hour. But the unease didn't leave him. It settled deep into his marrow. When he reached his house, he immediately went to the basement. From a hidden floorboard beneath his workbench, he pulled out a heavy, olive-drab lockbox. Inside rested his old military-issue 6-hour 9mm and 3 spare magazines. He loaded them methodically, the familiar clink of the brass rounds calming his frayed nerves. He knew standard ball ammunition wouldn't do much against the old folklore monsters, but a bullet was still a bullet. It would buy him time. The sun dipped below the city skyline by 8:30 p.m., bleeding a bruised purple and orange across the sky. Sam sat in his dark living room, the lights off, watching the street through a slit in the blinds. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the distant rhythmic thumping of bass from a passing car and the hum of window AC units. Then, the air in the room changed. The smell hit him first. It drifted through the open kitchen window, thick, foul, and undeniably wild. A heavy, metallic thud echoed from the roof directly above his head. The old wooden beams groaned under a sudden, massive weight. Something was pacing up there. The steps weren't human, they were quadrupedal. A heavy rhythmic thump-thump-thump that moved from the front porch roof toward the back of the house. Sam stood up, keeping low, his thumb sliding the safety of the 6 hour. Outside the kitchen window, the motion sensor floodlight snapped on, baiting the small backyard in a harsh, white glare. Sam crept toward the kitchen, his back pressed against the drywall. He peered around the frame, looking out into the yard. Standing right in the center of the lawn, fully illuminated by the floodlight, was Lawrence. He was still wearing the charcoal suit, but it was ruined. The fabric was shredded along the shoulders and chest, revealing thick, coarse black hair pushing through pale, stretching skin. His spine was arched at a horrific, unnatural angle, his joints cracking with a sound like snapping dry branches as his body fought to reshape itself. Lawrence lifted his head. His eyes were no longer amber, they were burning, luminescent yellow discs. He looked directly through the glass at Sam, his jaw unhinged to reveal rows of razor-sharp, crowding teeth. He didn't rush the house. Instead, he raised one long, clawed finger and slowly dragged it across his own throat, mimicking a blade. Then, with a terrifying explosive burst of speed, he leaped over Sam's 6-foot wooden fence and vanished into the shadows of the alley. Sam didn't blink until the motion sensor light clicked off, plunging the backyard back into an oppressive, ink-black darkness. His breathing was shallow, his ribs tight. In the sandbox of Iraq, he had faced men with AK-47s and hidden IEDs. You could shoot a man, you could outmaneuver an insurgent, but how do you fight a shadow that shatters its own bones to grow stronger? He didn't waste time panicking. Sam was a pragmatist. When an engine was failing, you didn't cry about it, you looked for the right tool to fix it. He knew the lore. True lycanthropy wasn't Hollywood magic, it was an ancient viral curse of blood and teeth. And classical lore dictated only one definitive stop: silver. At 2 a.m., Sam broke into his own auto shop. He didn't turn on the overhead fluorescents, relying instead on the low amber beam of a tactical flashlight clipped to his vest. He walked directly to the back storage room, where he kept his specialized welding equipment and scrap metals. He didn't have silver bullets, and he didn't have time to cast them. But he did have a collection of old, sterling silverware passed down from his grandmother, sitting in a dusty box in his office, and a high-heat oxyacetylene torch. For the next 3 hours, the garage filled with the hiss of blue flame and the bright, blinding glare of melting metal. Working with a mechanic's precision, Sam melted the silver down and expertly coated the tips of his 9mm hollow point rounds, letting the liquid metal settle into the cavities before hardening. He didn't stop there. He took a heavy, solid steel crowbar from his toolbox, scored the tip with an angle grinder, and brazed a thick, jagged layer of molten silver over the business end. By the time the sky turned a sickly, pre-dawn gray, Sam was armed. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore, he was a soldier, re-engaging the enemy. The text message arrived on his phone at exactly 6 a.m. It came from an unknown number. "The moon is full tonight, Samuel. The pack smells a coward. Run all you want, but a beast always catches its scent." Sam stared at the screen, his face hardening into granite. He didn't reply. He knew the werewolf was playing psychological warfare, trying to flush him out of his fortified positions. In a big city like Chicago, a monster could blend into the sprawling urban decay, using the crowded alleyways and abandoned rail yards as its personal hunting grounds. Sam spent the day turning Smith's Auto Care into a kill box. He rigged the heavy hydraulic car lifts, prepped the industrial air compressors, and strategically placed canisters of highly flammable acetylene near the entrance. If Lawrence wanted a fight, Sam was going to give him a war. As the sun began to dip below the horizon on the night of the full moon, The city fell into an eerie, expectant silence. The humidity peaked, thick enough to choke on. Sam sat on an upturned milk crate in the center of the dark garage, the silver-tipped crowbar resting across his knees, his zigzauer strapped to his chest. Then, from the roof above, came a sound that made his blood run cold. It wasn't a thump this time. It was the horrific, screeching sound of tearing metal. Lawrence wasn't looking for a door. He was peeling back the corrugated steel roof like a tin can. A massive, fur-covered arm, thick as a tree trunk and ending in 5 razor-sharp obsidian claws, punched through the ceiling, casting a terrifying elongated shadow under the pale light of the rising full moon. The ceiling erupted in a shower of rust, fiberglass insulation, and jagged metal. Down through the gaping wound in the roof dropped the beast. It no longer bore any resemblance to the man named Lawrence. The charcoal suit was gone, reduced to bloody tatters, stuck to a nightmare of corded muscle, coarse black fur, and elongated, digitigrade legs. Standing on 2 feet, it towered at nearly 8 feet tall. Its muzzle was long and wet with thick ropey saliva, and its eyes burned like twin road flares in the darkness of the garage. The creature let out a howl, not a mournful cry to the moon, but a deafening bass-heavy roar that shattered the glass of the office windows and vibrated right through Sam's combat boots. Sam didn't flinch. His military training overrode the primal urge to freeze. As the werewolf lunged, clearing 15 feet in a single bound, Sam hit the release valve on the industrial air compressor he had rigged. A blinding, high-pressure blast of freezing air and aerosolized brake cleaner slammed directly into the beast's sensitive face and burning eyes. The monster shrieked, veering off course and crashing violently into a heavy steel tool chest, sending wrenches and sockets scattering across the concrete floor. Sam drew the zigzauer, brought his sight pictured up, and squeezed off 3 rapid shots. The silver-tipped hollow points struck through, burying themselves into the creature's thick chest. Where normal lead would have just enraged the beast, the silver burned. The werewolf bellowed in agony as a foul, black smoke hissed from the wounds, the flesh blistering and melting under the ancient metal's touch. But it wasn't dead. With a terrifying backhanded swipe, the monster struck Sam across the room. The force of the blow lifted him off his feet and launched him into the side of a lifted Ford F-150. Sam hit the metal hard, the breath exploding from his lungs as his ribs cracked. The gun flew from his hand, skidding across the grease-slicked floor and disappearing under a workbench. Sam gasped for air, tasting iron. He looked up just as the werewolf stalked toward him, limping slightly from the silver burns but driven by an insatiable, supernatural rage. "You are just meat, soldier," the beast rumbled, Lawrence's voice now a distorted, demonic chorus. The monster raised a massive clawed hand to deliver the killing blow. Sam, acting purely on survival instinct, reached out and grabbed the lever for the hydraulic lift holding up the 3-ton Ford truck. He pulled it down hard. The heavy truck slammed downward with a deafening hydraulic screech. The front bumper caught the werewolf squarely across its back, pinning the colossal beast to the concrete floor with thousands of pounds of crushing weight. The monster roared, its spine cracking as it fought desperately against the mechanical pressure. its claws tearing uselessly at the solid steel lift. Sam staggered to his feet, clutching his broken ribs. He didn't look for his gun. Instead, he gripped the heavy steel crowbar, the one scored and braced with a jagged layer of pure grandmother's silver. He stepped over the thrashing-pinned monster. The werewolf snapped its jaws, its yellow eyes wide with a sudden, desperate realization of its own mortality. "My shift is over, Lawrence," Sam growled. With the last of his strength, Sam drove his silver-clad crowbar downward, plunging it deep through the creature's thick fur and straight into its monstrous heart. The werewolf convulsed violently. A blinding flash of pale, smokeless fire erupted from the wound, and a horrific, high-pitched scream echoed through the garage. Then, the burning eyes went dull. The massive muscular frame began to shudder, shrinking and shifting, until the terrifying beast was gone, leaving only the broken, lifeless body of a man in a ruined charcoal suit, pinned beneath the truck. Sam let go of the crowbar, leaning heavily against the F-150 as the adrenaline began to drain from his system. Outside, the distant, indifferent sounds of Chicago's nightlife, sirens, traffic, the hum of the city, filtered through the ruined roof. He wiped the sweat and blood from his forearm, looking at his grease-stained hands. He had survived the night. Tomorrow, he'd have to fix the roof, clean the floor, and figure out what to do with a dead body. But as Sam looked up at the full moon shining through the broken ceiling, he knew one thing for certain. Smith's Auto Care was officially closed for repairs.